Hi, I have a mic and a pulse, and this is my fourth video going over all 5 of Starfield's skill trees to figure out what the skills do and what gameplay secrets they could hint at. This time dealing with the science tree. If you haven't watched the first tree, don't worry, no one else has either. So, without further ado, part 4, New Life and New Customizations! The science tree primarily houses skills dedicated to the classic 4 X's of gameplay. Exploring new worlds, exploiting their resources, expanding your territory, and expertly administering medical care to those in need. Exploration has astrodynamics to help get you to new worlds, and then a full 6 skills for scanning things, covering plants, animals, rocks, and whole planets, with one extra that might increase scan range or speed, and a last one that might actually be for your minimap radar rather than your scanner itself. Astrophysics is the only scanning skill with confirmed mechanics and does focus on the act of scanning itself, but others might relate more to the subject being scanned, such as botany giving you more resources from plants and xenobiology giving you bonus damage against aliens. We haven't been told whether you need to fully upgrade your skills in order to fully analyze a plant or creature, with the 2 main pieces of evidence being A, we can have outposts gather resources from local plants and animals, but only with the right skills, which supports the idea that you would need to improve your relevant skills somewhat in order to learn what resources you can get from a local creature. But B, you can make money by completely scanning a planet and selling the data to other nerds, which supports the idea that you wouldn't need to upgrade your abilities to scan something fully, as that would require you to master at least 3 skills before you could ever make money off of your scans. As Bethesda wants to encourage a wide variety of playstyles, including chill nerd who just wants to look at all of the plants, I'm leaning towards option B. Geology doesn't seem to require you to scan the rocks you're mining, but could also affect your ability to locate resources, especially from orbit, as in real life finding oil deposits is one of the major drivers of geologist employment. And we can see in some scans that there are some resources on planets that have what looks like a rarity marker and might need higher skill levels to detect or harvest. Speaking of rare resources, we can see formulas that include elements labeled L and HN, which are not real-life elements, as well as CN for copernicium, an incredibly heavy element that has only been created in laboratories as it's too unstable to exist in nature. These elements could have been created through some kind of alien technology, much like Mass Effect's Element Zero, though it doesn't seem like they're anywhere near as coveted as the planets that have them don't seem to be crawling with miners and bristling with defenses. They could also be what the floating alien structures are made out of, though the gravity tech does clearly affect other materials as well. For exploiting those resources, we've got 4 skills for the different types of upgrades you're researching, 1 skill that might affect your research itself, either increasing the speed of projects or the number of projects you can run at once, and 1 that has the same gear and drafting equipment motifs as the other research skills, but with the focus on the blueprints themselves rather than anything on the blueprints. My best guess is that it could be used to reverse engineer equipment, breaking it down in order to learn how to replicate the item itself, its upgrades, or potentially even its legendary effects, as it is a presumably quite powerful tier 4 skill. Other notes about research: 1, we know you can have labs staffed by crew on both your spaceship and outposts. It's unclear how they work, but as we don't see any kind of research score on the research menu, I'm guessing that each scientist handles 1 project at a time, with the player also getting one of their own, with higher-leveled research projects requiring higher-leveled scientists to carry out, and perhaps the hardest projects only being available to the player themselves. 2, neither the melee weapons nor the spacesuits we've seen have a modification section on their stat blocks. When it was just melee weapons, I thought they might not be customizable at all, especially since we didn't see any modified melee weapons in either trailer. However, we know for a fact that there are helmet/spacesuit mods because A, they have their own skill, and B, the research menu has a helmet mods option. So I guess that some of the elements of the user interface are just on a need-to-know basis and will be revealed once they become relevant. It still seems like it should be there in case you find a modified piece of loot, but perhaps there's some rule that you can't find loot with any mods you couldn't make yourself, sort of like how Fallout 76 won't drop legendary versions of some items until you have their blueprints. I'll grant that armor and melee weapons being customizable isn't a shocking revelation to anyone who hasn't been deceived by my previous videos, but when your hobby is to analyze footage for info, and that info has been hidden because it's not aesthetically pleasing, you can go a little crazy. Now, for expanding your glorious space empire, you have outpost development, which should help with things like getting more resources and possibly colonizing a wider variety of worlds, as your basic wind turbines and solar panels aren't going to do much good on Pluto. It also helps us build even more scanning systems, in case your other scanning options weren't good enough. There are also two more expanding skills that are weird to figure out. One of them might not even really be in the category. 4B is clearly outpost related, as it has the standard flag and buildings of the outpost perks, but instead of the usual habitat bubble, its patch depicts what appears to be the cover of SimCity. As building a whole city would be ruled out by tech limits, governing one should be a social skill, and taking over cities/planets is more of a faction thing. I'm guessing it might be some sort of automation process, allowing you to send a couple of robots with some building materials onto a planet to build their own outposts while you sit back and rake in the chloro side lanes. 4A has been baffling me since we first glimpsed it in last year's trailer. If there's a round object or logo in these trailers, I have looked at it, and I can say that it's not a Chronomark watch, it's not Constellation's compass logo, it's not any of the crosshairs we've seen, it's not the space station from the teaser, it doesn't quite look like the alien rings, it's not this tattoo on Emil Pagliarulo's hand, and it's not a freaking astrolabe. I put it in this category because I thought it looked kind of like Constellation Satellite if you removed the solar panels, with them potentially being added back in the higher perk tiers, and thus could be related to space stations, but going back over it, the perk doesn't look more like it than it does anything else, and thus must remain unexplained. And while you're exploring space, exploiting its resources, and expanding your empire, you're probably going to need to expertly administer medical care to yourself or others / those in need. I don't have a lot of comments on the medical skill, other than that it's odd that the original perk description only said it affected medkits when we know there are other healing items such as healing pastes. Perhaps their inclusion was implied. So, those are, or possibly aren't, the perks. My overall assessment of this skill tree depends heavily on whether the skills I completely made up functions for actually do the cool things I made up, but the exploration stuff looks good, and I'm definitely looking forward to traveling the galaxy and completing the Pokedex. The research, on the other hand, actually seems a little limited. I definitely find it weird that there don't seem to be any research options for spaceship components, but I do have a theory about that. I'll elaborate on the tech video. But I also have a theory that that theory is wrong, so be sure to tune in next time for even more caveats!